Dear colleagues, many greetings from Pula. My name is Sabina Vidulin. I am working at the Academy of Music as full professor, leading the courses Music Education and Didactics of Music. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation and congratulate them for the very interesting topics which will be presented at this conference. The title of my presentation is Keeping Up with the Innovative Teaching Strategies in Music, Detection and Interpolation, based on the analysis and conclusions in relation to two starting points. The first is art and education, while the second is teaching strategies. My presentation aims to highlight the potential and efficiency of listening to music and musical understanding through a new strategy, cognitive-emotional listening. Since works of art compel us to question social, political, and moral norms, music art as subject has several roles in education. In addition to its impact on knowledge acquisition and skill development, it affects the development of critical thinking, stimulates creativity and innovation, and enables pupils' social, emotional, and aesthetic development. Education and art have always been a matter of discourse among experts as well as the public. These are subjects of interest not only to music and art teachers and the music professionals in general, to teachers of other subjects, parents whose children attend primary and secondary schools, media, in short, everybody. Just as with football or healthcare, everybody feels compelled to comment on art lessons as if they are equally or even better acquainted with this field than the teachers themselves. We can hear comments such as, for example, that music should not be a part of the educational process, that the subject should only be elective. Unable to provide more sophisticated arguments, commentators mention the 3 hours of work per day or the 3 months of annual vacation. Music teachers are also often faced with misunderstandings of those who are professionally involved in some branch of music and feel compelled, although they are not acquainted with group class teaching, nor with the curricula, and certainly not with the challenges faced by those who teach music today. Sometimes not even teachers of other school subjects understand music teachers, since they often regard music classes as less valuable and less important than the other subjects, which is especially devastating. And this is not the end. Music teachers are often faced with a lack of understanding, judging attitude and disapproval from parents. We can note that no clear statements about the position of music in education are described in the national standards and documents. This list of aggravating factors should definitely include teachers' modest earnings and the increasingly high demands placed in front of them, both in terms of education and administration. And then there are actual daily challenges of teaching, sloppy performance and ineffective approach in practice on the part of music teachers themselves. Considering all the above, what is, if anything, that can be done to change the situation? I will try to answer on some points taking into consideration, as you can see, the following contents: the line between art and education, teaching strategies and music classes, from standard strategies to new trends in the domain of music listening, and cognitive-emotional listening to music, the efficiency of the new strategy of music listening. Analysis, interpretation, and creation of art require a very careful discourse, different and probably more carefully shaped than the narratives of the other educational areas. This is exactly why there are so many definitions and perspectives of artists and theories of various fields regarding what art represents. Art is perceived as creative expression, aesthetic experience, manner of expression and communication. Creative expression is reflected through human imagination and creation, while the aesthetic experience and impressions are provoked by the artist's capability to convey ideas and emotions. Experiences and impressions stimulate thought and affect attitudes, as well as emotional, intellectual, and sensory reactions of the observer. Artist and the audience are joined in a dialectic unity. Artists use their work to convey messages and present their own perspective and to enrich and inspire the people around them. On the other hand, stimulated by the artist's imagination, the audience creates its own perspective and takes part in the artistic experience. Since works of art are about expressing ideas, the artist can also encourage social change. It is a fact that art plays an important role in shaping the identity of the individual and the society because it is a means of expressing one's own culture, tradition, and values, and thus serves to preserve cultural heritage. Precisely because it is subjective and cannot be treated unequivocally, as it varies and changes depending on the context, time, surroundings, culture, and individual beliefs, art represents a major potential challenge and a topic of endless discussions. It is also the platform for dialogue and understanding of various perspectives, an incentive to observe the world from different angles, always open to new experiences and ideas. However, it does not necessarily need to be all of the above. Some works are simply art per se. They have nothing to do with the artist's desire to describe anything or convey to the audience. The only message is there is none, and that is legitimate. And that is why art is so beautiful and alluring. Which of these can be viewed in relation to the educational system, that is, can art be accepted as an indispensable part of the educational system, or is its role to refer to the STEM narrative predominant in the last few decades really secondary and less valuable? We believe that the role of art in education is manifold. It represents a means of expression, communication for the pupils, enabling them to develop analytical and critical thinking skills. It serves as a strategy for stimulating creativity and innovation and provides opportunities for the pupils' overall development with emphasis on emotional and aesthetic development. Our subjects should therefore be more strongly present as to influence the pupils' aesthetic and holistic development and not only improve the level of their understanding and application of knowledge and skills. If education is taken as the basic pillar of society because it shapes the future of an individual and society, isn't its most important element none other than art? Subjects which are part of the curriculum, such as music and art, are very important in this regard, but cannot be designed nor implemented in a routine manner. A lot of consideration should be given to the content of the lessons, the works presented, as well as activities carried out in the music and extra music context. It is necessary to take consideration of the basic human values and demonstrate the importance of preserving one's own historical cultural heritage. The music curriculum establishes that the purpose of lessons is to introduce the pupils to music of various origin and of different styles and types, but also highlights that learning and teaching should be consistent with contemporary scientific insights and trends which indicate openness and flexibility of the learning and teaching process, didactic pluralism, research and project learning. Respecting the psychological and cultural aesthetic principle and the principles of synchronicity and interculturality, the efforts are focused on integrative and interdisciplinary teaching so that the pupils can get acquainted with music art, actively practice music, and develop their taste in music. However, it has become evident nowadays that in addition to getting acquainted with music, it is necessary to raise the pupils' awareness and make them observe the world critically, which is why efforts are directed at their socio-emotional development. Finding appropriate, up-to-date teaching strategies has always been a burning issue in education, and the routes to achieve this vary depending on the time and pedagogical ideas. Komensky, Freinet, Montessori, Dale, and many other pedagogues underline the importance of active learning, research-based classes, and experience-based learning. Dale's cone of experience is still mentioned as a valuable contribution which is based on the idea that receiving verbal and visual messages is actually a passive way of learning and supports pupils' activity in the form of personal experience, observation, impression, research, brainstorming, and so on. Timeless didactic principles must be respected, but also enhanced with multimedia, which brings new possibilities into the teaching process. Despite the progress and modernization of teaching, which will probably be achieved with the application of contemporary strategies and teaching technologies, it is important to ask why, when, and how these should be applied, searching at the same time for new teaching methods. In that regard, teachers are expected to be initiators and innovators and bring different ideas and alternative sources into classes. In school practice, teachers should apply a wide range of methods allowing the pupils to gain knowledge, acquire skills, and shape their attitudes, and also develop teaching and learning methods to improve the pupils' knowledge and skills. However, the modernization of teaching requires more than merely apply a new strategy and generate a new theoretical template. Rather, its efficiency in practice should also be explored and verified. Since the notion of strategy is interpreted differently because of its narrower and wider meaning, we will analyze what it means in the educational teaching context. It is starting idea that a strategy implies a plan, procedure, a method used to achieve a certain goal. In the context of education, it refers to methods and approaches teachers use to approximate the learning process to the pupils' competencies and achieve the expected outcomes. Thus, for example, teaching methods and materials are adapted and various auditory, visual and audiovisual aids are used in addition to different technological tools that are being incorporated. Pupils are encouraged to explore, implement projects, participate actively, work in pairs and in groups so as to stimulate their understanding of a specific phenomenon. The teaching strategy, therefore, includes a combination of methods and procedure, media and technologies that stimulate pupils' activity for the purpose of achieving specific educational goals. It implies the skill of preparing and using appropriate procedures and methods, prompting the pupils to participate in classes. It represents the manner in which pupils acquire new knowledge and develop competencies. Finding the appropriate teaching strategy is important because it affects the learning efficiency and the pupil's motivation, creates a stimulative environment, and offers support to pupils. I will use the example of music listening to examine which methods and procedures are applied in teaching music at school. Because music is primarily experienced, the basic method applied is demonstration. Singing, playing, listening to music, either recorded or performed by the teacher or the pupils. The demonstration method is connected with the oral presentation method, where new information is provided on the musical piece and its elements. The conversation method is very important here as it encourages two-way communication and drawing independent conclusions. Procedures which can be used when listening to music and understanding music are written work, discussion, and cooperative learning, including the following: guided and independent music listening, analytical listening with or without assigning tasks, illustrative listening, fragmentary or integrative listening, cognitive or emotional listening. Looking at the wider context, we can conclude that these are strategies of active learning and learning by discovery focused on the musical, historical, analytical context of listening to music and music understanding. Active music listening using appropriate methods and procedures allows the pupils to get acquainted with music of various types, styles, and genres, acquire knowledge of musical elements and forms, to experience, learn about and understand music, and learn how to appreciate it and thus improve their competencies. The music curriculum shows that it is left up to the teachers to observe music in the context and not only in terms of music theory, which is apparently the biggest challenge because some of them do not know the best way to accomplish this. Although the recommendation is to apply content integration and an interdisciplinary approach, in practice, these are applied only sporadically. Attention is rarely given to the specific piece of music and messages it can communicate to young generations. Pupils can be introduced to music literature through a musical, historical, analytical approach which connects the process of listening to music with the analysis and evaluation of a musical piece. However, the basic question is whether music classes are an end in itself or if their purpose should be achieving the pupil's integral holistic development. The answer is that the pupil's holistic development should definitely be stimulated. Which strategies could be used to achieve this? How can music affect the pupil's experiences, their emotions, reflections, associations, and critical thinking? Now, my intention is to focus on the domain of music listening, which, if the musical, historical, analytical strategy is enhanced with the words humanistic and holistic, will break the former bounds of the so-called standard cognitive listening. I will focus precisely on the domain of music listening not as an end in itself, but in the artistic and social historical context with a humanistic and holistic orientation. The idea is to use the new strategy of music listening to focus on the pupil's experience, observation, and understanding so they would be better acquainted with music, accept it as their own, and also accept themselves through a piece of music. The new strategy of music listening, the cognitive emotional listening, is based precisely on those paradigms. Knowing that experience is a pupil's impression or feeling they get while listening to music, which they perceive, interpret, and emotionally react to, it is evident that music evokes different feelings which vary from one child to the other, depending on previous experiences, beliefs, values, emotions, current state, as well as expectations and context. Understanding and being aware of our own experiences can facilitate self-assessment and self-awareness and help develop emotional intelligence. Furthermore, understanding and accepting other pupils' experiences can help build empathy, understanding, and interpersonal relationships. Experience as something entirely based is often connected with independent observation, which is the individual's capability to notice, observe, and interpret the musical and extra-musical world based on impression, attention, experience, and personal knowledge. Independent observation is not only about noticing, but also about interpreting and reflecting on what is being observed. The next level of cognitive emotional music listening is understanding the process through which an individual acquires specific knowledge. It is built upon experience and independent observation. This ability to associate information, ideas, and context to create a clear picture or deeper knowledge of a certain phenomenon arises from analysis, contextualization, synthesis, and reflection. When listening to and getting acquainted with music, independent observation and understanding music and the surrounding world are important for the pupils, as these enable them to express their emotions, accept oneself to the musical and extra-musical context, and accept the music. The new music listening strategy, the cognitive emotional listening to music, is based on research activities in teaching and active and experiential teaching. It encourages pupils' activity through experience, observation, impression, understanding, research, and critical thinking that lead to accepting music and getting to know oneself. It has its own plan, methods, and procedure, the manner in which a certain outcome is achieved. Through specific steps, the teacher is able to prepare for more efficient teaching and thus develop pupils' competencies. With demonstration, discussion, and cooperative learning methods and different procedures, for example, listening with or without tasks, listening to the complete musical piece or only its fragments, to the musical, historical, analytical context of listening and learning about a musical piece, using multimedia, the goal is to contribute to pupils' holistic development, self-acceptance through music and with music. Content integration, multimodality, and interdisciplinary approach are important features of cognitive emotional music listening. This strategy can affect pupils' experiences, their emotions, reflections, associations, and critical thinking as demonstrated by the results of scientific research. So far, cognitive emotional listening to music in Croatian schools has been investigated in 2 scientific research, while the third one is in progress. All this research is part of scientific projects registered at the Jure Dobrila University of Pula. The first research was carried out in the upper grades of the primary schools from September to December. The intention was to compare standard and cognitive emotional listening to music through control and experimental groups and define the characteristics of cognitive emotional listening. The research included 557 pupils from 30 classes and 14 music teachers. During the first semester, 4 music classes were held where pupils listened to 4 segments from music pieces multiple times, from the Waltz from the Masquerade by Khachaturian, Wellington's Victory by Beethoven, the Sea and Sinbad's Ship from Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, and Pavan by Fauré. The second research was carried out as part of the second scientific project from September to December 2021 in Croatian primary music schools. The objective was to establish how such listening can be connected with dictations, singing by ear and by note, rhythmic and melodic rhythmic exercises, and other theoretical content in ear training classes, in order to stimulate pupils' experience, learning, and memorizing. The research included 997 pupils and 32 ear training teachers from 19 primary music schools in Croatia. 5 lessons were taught, 1 for the second grade and 2 for the third and fifth grade each. The pupils were introduced to the following musical pieces: Symphony No. 9 in A minor, opus 95, from the New World, movement 4 by Dvorak, and the Dance of the Hours from the opera La Gioconda by Ponchielli. They participated in musical as singing, playing instrument, dancing, and extra musical activities as acting, talking about the social historical context of the musical piece. The third research is in progress. The objective is to examine the efficiency of the new strategy of listening to music in music art classes in gymnasiums. 4 lessons were prepared, 500 pupils and 4 teachers are participating in the research. A total of 12 second grade classes and 13 fourth grade classes are included. The following pieces are presented. Morning Mood from Per Gynt, Suite number 1 by Grieg, the Waltz number 2 from the Suite for the Orchestra number 1 by Shostakovich, Adagio from the Concierto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo, and Violet from The Life of Flowers by Pejacevic. The results of the research of cognitive emotional listening to music in Croatia's primary schools shows that the accuracy of pupils' evaluations of musical elements is similar, irrespective of the chosen approach to music listening, although the cognitive emotional produced somewhat more accurate responses. Although they experience the music pieces as equally emotionally regardless of the approach, the pupils exposed to the cognitive emotional listening to music experience the emotions with a pleasant hedonistic note more intensely and those with an unpleasant note less intensely. 5th graders like music classes and musical pieces, but those who receive lessons based on the cognitive emotional listening like music classes and music pieces slightly more. Musical and extra musical activities carried out by teachers as part of cognitive emotional listening made pupils listen to music more carefully, express their emotions and thoughts more intensely, and evaluate how they like the piece, its content, and the didactical articulation. Children who listen to music using the cognitive emotional approach produce more drawings related to the contents of the piece. At the end of the school year, more children who listened to 4 pieces using the cognitive emotional listening to music recalled the pieces. Music teachers noticed that cognitive emotional listening improved both the children's focus and their interest and investment in music, as well as their expression of emotions related to the musical piece. The results of the research in Croatia's primary music schools show that pupils prefer both the music and the classes if cognitive emotional listening to music was applied. Pupils who received lessons with it had more reflections about the music related to the wider context. Ear training teachers point out that learning outcomes are achieved based on the strategy at least as well with the standard method, but the pupils are more involved in classes. The teachers notice that cognitive emotional listening to music stimulates children to express their emotions more clearly, be more active and creative. In general, they notice improved focus and motivation among their pupils. The results obtained from 2 finished research lead to the conclusion that there are obvious advantages to cognitive emotional listening to music since multimodal interactive activities are applied in musical and extra musical context. Cognitive elements are mastered equally well as with the standard approach, that is, pupils achieve the learning outcomes at an equal extent. However, the pupils experience emotions more intensely and like both the lesson and the music they are presented with. They think about the content of the musical piece and evaluate it, have more reflections and associations about the music and the wider context, focus more on the content of the music piece, and remember them even after some time. The teachers noticed that the cognitive emotional listening to music improved both the children's focus and their interest in music. The improvement was also visible in the structure of the lesson plans prepared according to the cognitive emotional listening because it supports, among others, innovation and creativity in class. So, to conclude, in this presentation I try to answer the first question: what can we do to change the situation? By sharing my example and inviting the colleagues to include some innovative changes into their teaching, find appropriate teaching strategies and examine their efficiency in class. Since musical piece invite us to question social, political and moral norms, whether purposefully or not, they are an excellent platform for shaping one's identity and raise the awareness of both pupils and teachers. This is exactly why musical pieces presented to children need to be carefully considered both in the musical and extra-musical context, because this contributes to the shaping of basic human values. To achieve this, a musical piece as stimulus and inspiration should be presented using the appropriate teaching strategy that affects the pupil's motivation, interest, and active participation. The results show that cognitive emotional listening has encouraged pupils to experience music, to react with emotion, observe, make associations, link the music with other viewpoints, and with the teacher's assistance, learn to understand music and eventually accept it. On the other hand, the teachers were introduced to the possibilities of cognitive emotional listening, and hopefully they understand how beneficial it was to invest their knowledge and energy into searching for and finding new ways to improve classes in favor of the pupils' holistic development. Thank you very much for your attention.